c'est moi.
Et vous?
Jim.
Jim et Jules alors?
Non, Jules et Jim.
Jules et Jim, deux hommes, deux amis, bouleversés par la même femme.
Vous êtes deux idiots.
1, 2, oh. Une femme généreuse et sincère, à la recherche d'un bonheur sans jalousie, sans mensonge, sans hypocrisie. Cette femme, c'est Jeanne Moreau, la plus grande actrice française, qui vous fera rire et vous fera pleurer.
On a été vraiment heureux tous les deux.
Mais nous sommes heureux. Enfin, moi.
I'm getting so tired of doing these tributes. This is a particularly hard one because I've always loved Jeanne Moreau. I always had kind of a thing for her. She was just kind of that sultry, pouty French beauty. You know, for my seminal years as a young guy discovering international film, there was Catherine Deneuve and there was Jeanne Moreau. There were others, of course, too. Wonderful French actors like Anouk Aimée and so many others, but Jeanne Moreau, she also just worked with some of the great directors of all time, and I had a lot of respect for her career. I would say she was probably best known for Jules and Jim, although she also worked with Antonioni on La Notte, and she worked with the great Louis Malle on Elevator to the Gallows. You know, she was an international star. She worked here in the States. She worked in all over, but mostly, of course, in France and somewhat in Italy. Yeah, just was in some of my favorite films. It's a great loss. She also really kept working. You know, she aged on screen from a very, very young woman in the early 50s when she started. She worked right up into about, a couple of years back. She was still working. Passed away this week. Who died this past Monday at the age of 89. And I'm going to go back and watch some of her films and just gaze upon the beauty that is Jeanne Moreau. Hey everybody, this is Adam Schartoff, your host of Filmwax Radio, and you're listening to episode number 419. And it is today, as I record this introduction, it is Thursday, August the 3rd. We're here in the crux of summer here in New York City, back with a new episode. I should say that I think on the last episode I may have said that the cast, the team behind Patty Cakes is going to be on this episode, and I misspoke. I'm going to actually put that on the next episode of the podcast, on episode 420. That film comes out on the 18th of August, and it just seemed still a little premature to be putting it up a full 2 weeks before the film comes out. So instead, what I did is I grabbed a segment that I had recorded a while ago with the podcaster Jeff Goldsmith. We recorded this way back and I've been holding on to it because I keep hearing that Jeff is, who is, by the way, a great podcaster, great interviewer, and a very intelligent and thoughtful person. And I was very excited to have the opportunity to sit with him on a trip that he took a while back to New York City, and we recorded this in his hotel. And then we kept postponing putting the thing up because his online magazine had been only available, really designed historically for the iPad. And it will be coming out, I think, almost any day now for other tablets. But in the meantime, you can also see it online, I guess. So, of course, the online magazine is called Backstory. And if you want to go check it out, just go to backstory.net, and you can find out all about that. And as I said, any day, it will be available for all tablets. But it's currently available for the iPad. And I would have held on to it, but I really I've been waiting to play this great conversation for a really long time. So that's going to be the first segment with Jeff Goldsmith. That's the online magazine. Of course, he's better known, perhaps, in terms of his name, for the Q&A with Jeff Goldsmith, which is where he does these post-screening long conversations with filmmakers, screenwriters, other film types of people. They show the film, and then they talk about the making of the story of the film. And again, that's called the Q&A. So if you like what you hear and you're not currently familiar with the Q&A with Jeff Goldsmith, do subscribe. And so we're going to put that up in just a minute. Following that, I have on filmmaker Lisanne Skyler, who made a documentary, a personal documentary about her family and growing up with parents who were art collectors and art enthusiasts and owned for a spell of time an original Brillo Box made by Andy Warhol and signed by Andy Warhol. This documentary is called Brillo Box, 3 cents off. And again, we'll have the filmmaker on in just a little while. And that's the episode. So I want to thank everybody for your constant support of the podcast here in these dog days of summer. It means as much as ever to go onto iTunes, onto our page, and please do write us a nice review about... It's very easy to go to the iTunes store and just search under Filmwax or Filmwax Radio or Adam Shartoff for that matter, and then write us a good review, put in a star rating, and go ahead and submit that. Also, please do consider following us on Facebook and on Twitter and Instagram. We're very easy to find on all those platforms. The podcast is also available. If you're not, if you don't have iTunes, it's also available, of course, on the Rooftop Films blog, rooftopfilms.com, and then go to the blog, and all of our episodes, or at least quite a number of them, going back, are available there. Also available on Stitcher and on YouTube. We have a YouTube channel, another thing you can subscribe to, by the way. Thank you so much. So we're going to first here get into my conversation with Jeff Goldsmith, and this happened again. I think it was I want to say I don't even want to tell you how far back it goes, but it feels new. But if you are a listener, I guess you'll pick up enough clues. It goes back a good year and a half, I think, but that's not important. It's still very evergreen. Here it is again, my conversation with podcaster Jeff Goldsmith.
Hola.
That's Jeff Goldsmith, whose voice may be familiar to many listeners. You have your own podcast, I understand.
I think I understand. I have my own podcast, too. Sometimes I don't understand.
Yeah.
I mostly understand.
I think I got introduced to it or found out about your podcast through those fellas at Film Spotting, because they're very supportive of what you're doing.
Yeah, they are. I like those guys.
Yeah.
Film Spotting's good people.
You're in L.A., right?
Yeah,
okay.
In Los Angeles. I went out there for theater school, stayed out there ever since, theater and film, basically. I went to USC, and I originally grew up in Kansas City, and when you get out to L.A. and you go to theater and film school at USC, you don't go back. There's no reason.
But where'd you grow up?
Kansas City.
You did?
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's another factor, I suppose. There's not, which is maybe what you were getting at. There's not a lot to do back home. I'm sure there's regional, but that's not going to cut it for
definitely not
the ambitious type. But when did you find podcasting accidentally, incidentally, and did you just, what was it about it that you felt was...
there was this course at USC that I took, and it was called Cinema 466. It still exists. And basically every Thursday night when I was there, because it was a long time ago, Charles Champlain of the LA Times, the film writer and critic, he hosted it. And for the first time in my life, I saw a movie, and after the movie, they would ask the audience for questions, and you could ask a question of anything that came to your mind. For me, this was a completely foreign experience. I was blown away by it. So I took it officially, I took it unofficially, I snuck in, I audited it, and really they just kept letting me in. Yeah, they kept letting me in.
Finally, it was like, oh, it's that guy, come on.
Well, so then back in '03, I decided that I wanted to start my own screening series in L.A., and I was at Sundance, and basically, I don't know if you could still do things like this. I'm sure you can. I walked up to Thomas McCarthy after seeing The Station Agent.
Hollywood Reporter.
No, sorry. Yeah, other Thomas McCarthy. McCarthy,
the director.
The writer-director.
Of course.
After seeing The Station Agent. No, The Station Agent,
50-50. He did 50-50. That's a good one.
Yeah, and I basically told him I've been thinking about starting a screening series. I want Station Agent in my screening series, and he said yes.
Now, was that the one with Peter Dinklage?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so in 2003, in the fall of 2003, I did my first ever screening of my series, which was Peter Dinklage, Bobby Cannavale, and Thomas McCarthy for a screening of The Station Agent. And I had the wherewithal to video record it for some sort of posterity, and I'm going to find the tape and probably just digitize it and throw it up there.
Yeah, sure.
And basically 2 years later, the screening series went off without a hitch, and it became pretty successful pretty fast in L.A., and by 2005, that was when I saw that podcasting was starting up. It was called internet radio before that.
Yeah, right.
And basically, the concept made more sense when people understood that they could download it and listen to it later rather than live stream it, which is what a lot of the internet radio was.
I was started the same thing, albeit years later, but I started also on internet radio, a very good outfit called B-Box Radio. But then because I had a talk show and a lot of the hosts had music shows, they couldn't podcast them because of licensing, And so,
that's a big deal.
But the talk shows had the advantage that they could podcast, and then after I'm like, really, who is tuning in? At 7 or 4 o'clock or 7 o'clock. As I was a little bit motivated, I thought podcasting there seemed to be the thing rather than the after thing.
Yeah, well, I mean, so it was kind of novel when I started it, in which there weren't a lot of film podcasts like there are now.
Yeah.
And really, kind of my mantra was from the horse's mouth, just like all the journalism that I do, in which it should be from whoever I'm interviewing, rather than me. Some of the podcasts, they never have guests, right? And there's nothing wrong with that, but it's like the typical, Wayne's World, 2 guys in the basement talking about movies.
Right.
And that's fine.
Vanity projects.
Yeah, and some people love those, and some of them are really good at talking about movies. But the ones that I listen to, maybe it's just like I'm a dork and I want to learn something. I generally want to hear the guy that made the movie tell me about his trials and tribulations.
Yeah. Right.
So I mean, that took off, and I've been podcasting ever since, and I've dabbled with the concept of filming these things, something that I'm considering doing later this year. So,
well, it makes sense, at least for, if not promotional value, that the whole thing for posterity, as you put it before, that would be helpful. I also had a screening series 2 years ago in Brooklyn, and I just didn't have the wherewithal to think about shooting the Q&As. But my goodness, those would have been in some cases.
So you have no recording of it?
No, none of it.
That's crazy.
It wasn't on the scale, though, that I don't think, because we didn't have any. I mean, there were sometimes I did one with like Kevin Corrigan, things like that. A lot of directors came, which was great, by the way, for setting up this, because by this time I had so many relationships. By the time I actually started, that I already had like a reputation for not being too stupid. That's about all. So when it started, your podcast in 2005. To start in the format about storytelling, process of storytelling, because essentially, right, that's what the Q&A with Jeff Goldsmith is, right? Isn't it about the process of story making and telling?
Yeah, I mean, basically, I've always been screenwriting centric,
right?
And so that's kind of how people know me. But I've also had actors, directors, and producers on. Yeah. And, have been doing more of that, actually, in the last year or two.
Yeah. Well, it helps, right, too.
Yeah.
Who's on your current episode? It looked pretty...
Recently?
I think it was, or just even the current episode, like the one that's
the very last one was the director of The Gunman, and then this Friday, he also did Taken, so it was interesting to talk about action. And, he did District B13 with Luc Besson. It was really interesting because he really couldn't answer the question that I had, which is... why Luc Besson was writing all these great action movies and not directing them himself.
Right.
And he basically said Besson was just busy, which is cool, but it was really strange because Besson, for a while now, has been writing these really wild action movies and not directing them, and I kind of wish he would hop in there.
And his name is still above the title.
Yeah.
In many cases.
Right. Yeah. I've always been a fan of Besson's. I wish he would do some more action lately. But, I just finished the award season. So, during the award season... I was doing all the Oscar-nominated screenwriters. I did the 8th annual screenwriting nominees panel. We had 8 out of the 10 Oscar-nominated screenwriters, 2 of which became the Oscar winners a few days later. And I'm seasonal, so I did that, and then the day after the Oscars, I did Hot Tub Time Machine 2 with Steve Pink, that director, and that was great because Steve Pink had co-written High Fidelity. And just had all these great stories to tell about his past there. Yeah. So I kind of like to look at the storytelling from whatever perspective, whoever the guest is.
It's an interesting way in. And no one else. I don't think anybody else is doing that.
Some people do it a little. I mean,
really?
And then the outgrowth was, I started a magazine called Backstory, and we started in 2012, and it was an iPad. It still is an iPad magazine. And the only lesson that I learned there is that in the greatest recession of our lifetimes, not as many people have iPads as you would want. So I've literally gotten hate mail from non-iPad owners who want to kill me for not...
They think you're being...
they think I'm being elitist or something. And it's like, actually, no, making it for the iPad is the best way to publish. It looks beautiful. We know how big your screen is. We know how big to make our font size. It looks freaking gorgeous.
Right.
I mean, like some of like our art directors, when they get mad at me, they're joking with me and saying like, we're not even making a magazine, we're making a book, because like that's how much goes into every issue.
Wow.
So anyhow, the good news is I have recently, and I know we're going to be podcasting this a little later time with the release, but we've recently finally had the breakthrough that I wanted, that I've been waiting for the web, in which we could convert each issue of the iPad magazine to the web, so everybody that has a browser can see it. I don't think it'll work so great on the phone, but like I don't care, because
it's a breakthrough.
Yeah,
one breakthrough at a time.
Right.
Appreciate the breakthrough that you're getting, and not the ones that you haven't had yet.
Exactly, and what we do is we're the only magazine in the world that publishes screenplays in their entirety. So when we get somebody talking about their script and saying like, oh, there was this one section I had trouble on, it's not something you have to just interpret as a reader. You could go turn to page 87 if we're talking about page 87.
Right. I mean, and then it has the potential, and we don't have to include this information, but it has the ability to be far more interactive going in the future. You could do something far more interactive if you had like the developer, working with developers. Once it's online, because you can actually have the script facilitating thing, and then you have the comments come up as you and other images and other interactive stuff. It's possible.
Yeah. I mean,
because nobody's doing that in a central way. I mean, anybody could take their script, and in fact, now that I think of it, I'm remembering, who is it? A very famous filmmaker did actor.
Matthew Modine.
Matthew Modine. Thank you. My synapses take a little longer than yours. You're younger. Matthew Modine did that thing, didn't he? He did
with his book,
with his Full Metal Jacket. Right?
Yeah. With all of his photos from the set, he made it multimedia.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Well, I mean, honestly, we're there. To be honest,
Okay.
the developer that we use is the same. It's the same engine that the New Yorker and Vanity Fair use, and basically, it's the top for an
those
online
do
magazine.
Look great, right? Those do very well on the iPad.
Yeah, and so basically, finally. Literally at Sundance, I was venting to a friend of mine because the technology wasn't there, that I was going to have to go recreate every single page as a web page of backstory.
Right.
And we're 15 issues in, man. And it's about 200 pages an issue. It was going to be horrible. But luckily, 3 weeks after Sundance, I found out that the technology exists in which I could convert the magazine from the iPad for the web and basically give everyone the exact same experience, the exact same art direction. And I really just got to test to make sure that my buttons work.
Right.
And other than that, lock it behind a paywall so that, we could still pay our journalists, because I pay actually a top rate for my journalists, having been a journalist for so long
word,
myself.
That kind of thing?
Yeah.
How many people are involved in the magazine?
There's probably overall 10 of us.
Wow.
Sometimes
That's
a few more, sometimes a few less.
Right.
I mean,
It's
because
the IMF approach. You go through the different headshots.
Exactly.
Say for this particular issue, we want this guy, that guy.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, the weird thing is like I've had to make some weird decisions as a publisher because I get pitches from publicists, and sometimes if it's only slightly interesting, but I know that most of our readership can't see it yet because it doesn't exist, or it's not coming to their zone for the time that our issue's out. It's something that's only playing in 2 cities. It's tough because I have to be careful about what I publish, because I actually have to write the checks for each of these articles. You know what I mean? There's a negative cost to it. So I'm trying to deliver the stuff that I think that the readership wants from the feedback that I've gotten. And it's actually tough for me to turn down stuff because sometimes there's cool stuff that just the finances aren't there to cover it.
That's
so
right.
The only other part of the website that I'll have is we'll have a kind of blog component. So I mean, friends and family are some of them telling me that I'm crazy to do paid content in 2015, which is what we are. But honestly, I mean, the cost of paying the art director, the copy editor, the editor, my writers, I mean, there's a cost to it. So
Where is
basic.
that? So do you have sponsors and ads?
Well, yeah, we have
Advertisers?
ads, and I'm always looking to expand.
Sure.
But I mean, basically, as I say, we're subscriber supported, and each
Okay.
issue costs less than a beer. So it's I get these letters from people in my podcast. They're like, hey, if you're ever in my town, I want to buy you a beer. It's like, just go buy a copy of Backstory, and we're good, man. We're good.
We're
and it lasts longer than a beer, and you won't even burp it up. I promise.
No gas.
No gas. But yeah, and you know what I've had fun doing here in New York is because we're sitting in New York, we do theater stories and Backstory as well.
Uh-huh.
So I just saw It's Only a
no
Play.
wonder you're in Times Square.
Yeah, that's right. I just saw It's Only a Play, and it was, I think, one of the last nights that Martin Short was doing it with Matthew Broderick. He's going to be replaced by Nathan Lane, and we're going to interview the director. Actually, I'm going to interview the director, and it's going to be a cool piece about what it takes to kind of get this Broadway play kicking, because, I mean, it was funny. It was a good play.
Yeah.
Makes
sense.
Yeah, and I'm going to go tomorrow night. Actually, I'm really excited to go see the immersive theater experience of Sleep No More. And have you heard of that? Have you done that yet?
No. But
it's basically Macbeth set in a hotel, and they've recreated this hotel that they call the McKittrick Hotel. And there's, I think, 20 or 30 different actors, and you follow them around. You pick and choose, and it's a 3-hour experience. And I've been trying to work with them about who to talk to, the people that created and originated the play. And honestly, I'm a little out of my league because I do film stuff, and I have not been able to figure out who to talk to. And the few emails and phone calls that I've sent have been like kind of passed off with a shrug.
Is that world not familiar with Jeff Goldsmith?
Yeah, but I mean that world, like, you know, they want the publicity.
Yeah,
so I mean, like, the concepts exist. You just have to get through to the right person. And I know in their minds that they think that oh, you know, this play's been out for like 2 or 3 years. But, you know, actually they've said multiple times in the past that, oh, their performances are almost ending, and they're totally not. And I actually know that they're coming to L.A. From what I've heard, they are building a $1 million theater to make, you know, a hotel like that in L.A., in downtown L.A., and they're going to bring it to L.A. And I think the producers, and
so if you're listening out there, Sleep No More people, get on top of this.
I'm excited to have my experience tonight. I'm going to see it tonight, actually.
Wow.
But yeah, so I mean, it's going to be an interesting. The way that I'm kind of incorporated the podcast and backstory together is sometimes they cover the same thing, sometimes they don't. Occasionally, although many people know me as a podcaster, there's backstory readers that have no idea of the podcast.
Understood.
So every now and then we will actually put like some crazy episode in the magazine because we're able to embed audio and video as well.
How visible are you? Like outside of your doing those live Q&As?
Visible, you know, as the magazine,
just as a media personality.
I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't know how to rank myself. I know that
video would change that. That's my point. You're
talking
about media,
yeah.
You know, because you'd just be more.
But you know what's funny? It's podcasting has a power to it, and the power it's journalism on the go. And the only problem with video is you can't drive. Right. When you're watching video, you're not supposed to. So most of the people that I've met that are big fans of the podcast tell me that they either three things: they listen to the podcast in their commute, they walk their dog to it, or do, I swear to you, house chores to it.
Yeah, no, I know.
I haven't had much about people having sex to it yet, but house chores, yes. House chores, yes.
Yeah. So I would say that if you're doing housework, please wear very little clothing.
Yes.
If you're going to listen to it.
Or a sexy maid's outfit. But yeah, I mean, and so it makes sense that it's on the go, and you're utilizing your time because it's for people that really like to multitask and keep kind of their brain functioning when they're doing lower functioning activities. Right. So it makes sense. So I'm not sure how a video would do because you have to be chained down somewhere to watch it.
Yeah, I guess that's why they say if you're doing a video thing, keep it short because, you know.
Right.
This is what they say. This is not what I say. I know. So if you were to do the video version, you'd probably just want to take a piece of it.
Yeah.
I'm stepping into also video, but not for the podcast, for a different project, which is an offshoot, I suppose, where it would be me on the sets of films, shooting in Brooklyn, and so I'm right now in the process of trying to figure out how I'm going to create the pilot, and then it would be, and then the people that are backing it are like, I'm like, well, what do you think? How long? Like, 10, 12 minutes each, and I'm like, wow, that's.
But I think you could go longer. Actually, I actually argue that you could go longer, in which my whole mantra, for whatever reason, is longer. In which in the podcast, you know, people looked at me like a psycho when I started doing hour plus episodes. I've even had a 2-hour episode.
Well, for podcasting, I agree with you.
But wait a minute. Remember, this is done in front of a live audience.
Yeah.
So they've just seen a 2-hour movie. So it's like when I go 90 minutes for a podcast, that does push the audience a little.
Oh, right.
But they want it. They want it, and they stay for it. So
what are the sizes of the audience?
We generally screen in a 300-seat theater.
Okay.
Often at the LA Film School, which just seems to work out. I've been doing it there for years. But I go to other theaters as well. So, the biggest theater I've been in would be about 525 seats. That would be the DGA or WGA theater. Those are really big. And so you have an impetus when you have somebody having just watched a movie that the interview better be interesting, or they're going to get up and walk out.
Be good too,
and some people do.
Is it more important that the conversation be great and the movie can be whatever? It doesn't matter, right?
I have often found that sometimes, there have been a few movies that are clunkers. And sometimes it doesn't really matter because the lessons that you could learn from even the clunkers are so great. And you'll get such candid interviews from those directors. Yeah. Whereas sometimes, a middling movie, I'm not going to even say a success, but sometimes writers or directors are a little more secretive, protective, restrained with stuff like that, and they shouldn't be.
Right. Well, that's my question too. Is like how open they can be and how candid they can be.
Yeah.
Given how much is on the line for these.
Well, right, and so basically, it serves their purpose for posterity when they tell the good stories and they're honest about it. Because a lot of people, I know they know this, but it just doesn't hit them. In which this is your one chance to talk about the movie. This is your one chance to do it now, and it's not a 20th anniversary
very
screening.
nuanced way.
Yeah. And so, and I'm trying to do more retros, like of movies that are, 5-10 years older, plus, and it's a little harder for sometimes those people because some of the stuff that was going on they've forgotten. So it's really important to me to get people at the time that their movie is coming out to really kind of set the record down for what they could remember right now. And as I was saying, like, I like robust episodes for the podcast.
Yeah.
For Backstory, it's the same thing in which everything's becoming shorter, like you were saying, these 10 to 15-minute episodes. And I advise you not to do a 10 to 15-minute episode, to be honest. Like, if you're going to do video and really own it. So it's like when I do the video version of the podcast, if I get it together to get a team together to do it, there's still going to be an hour. Hour plus, and it's going to be like taking that amount of time.
You're approaching it though, like Jeff. You're approaching it in a archival perspective, which is admirable, and which I can identify with strongly because I feel like my show too is it's an archive too. It acts as an archive, and you could, if somebody decided to listen to the vast majority, it's like going to film school on some level.
That's right.
Because they have that. But
I'm
also
so I mean, like that would differentiate you from the other video, in which it makes me so mad. Like some of these film festivals, and I'm not going to name any names, but unfortunately, it's most of them. They'll do these great Q&As that they broadly publicized with really big name talent because they're big festivals. They're able to get it, and then they will put up these 2 to 3 minute clips online. And you're like, what?
Yeah.
Like, you had that person in your Q&A. You filmed it, clearly.
Right.
Why are you not streaming the whole thing? What is wrong with you?
Where is the whole thing going?
Right.
And what is it for?
Nowhere. I don't understand
it. Is it for the
it.
future? And why wouldn't you have the future be now?
I've had arguments with people at film festivals about this. They think I'm crazy. They're like, well, you're trying to take our content. Because, I've podcasts from film festivals. Actually, I'm really proud to say that I just got some really good recordings from the Turner Classic Movies Fest, which just happened in L.A. this week. I had 3 different recordists going around, and I've done it every year since they've existed. And it's a great way to get these Q&As, which are generally only 20 minutes for just the way their schedule works. But, I mean, they have really great people talking about these classic movies.
Yeah.
And I've done fests that are longer, but that drives me crazy because I really do like Q&As as well.
Yeah.
So when I do the video version, it's going to be an hour. And in Backstory, the strangest complaint that I'll get from people is that you put so much in there, man. I don't know where to start. It's
good.
Well, we publish every 2 months.
Oh.
So what I do is I give you enough material of these long reads because I like a long read that's in depth, not a short 300 to 500 word puff piece. I like a long read. So our average length of our pieces is 2,000 words.
When I was a kid and I heard about the Playboy interviews, because I didn't, of course, look at them. Right. But, no, they used to be then when I was a young adult, they actually they published them in, anthologies. And I loved those, and even Rolling Stone, too. And they had these long format interviews. And they were so good with, and at the time, I mean, celebrities were had something to say. I mean, not that they don't now, but they were such incredible people alive that still. So you could get
well, they were more candid. They weren't handled by their publicists.
They weren't so handled. Yeah, I mean, nowadays, I don't know. I mean, the interviews in both of those publications are much shorter, like a fraction of the original length. They used to, be, you can get like a 30-page interview, like crazy. Anyway, it's something that I miss, that kind of approach, or talk shows on TV. Where more long, you can get many more longer. The closest thing I guess we have is Charlie Rose, and even that I don't know. I haven't been watching that, but there is something to that. I was going to ask you something about the Turner thing. That I would like. I should time a trip in for that too, because that does intrigue me. That I would love to kind of see.
Yeah, they do it this time of year each year.
I heard.
And it's it's always interesting to see who they get. And some things they record themselves because essentially you want to disseminate information.
I know what I was going to ask you. Yeah, go ahead. Mm-hmm.
Well, you want to disseminate the information, and there isn't really an ownership on it because crime doesn't pay, neither does podcasting. So at the end of the day, when I'm doing a 20-minute segment from the Turner Classic Movie Fest, they're the ones that are actually the beneficiaries because it's raising the heightness on them, and it's having listeners focus for 20 minutes on their stuff.
Not only that, but let's face it, they only give you 20 minutes of the publicists, right? Is that what you mean?
No. It's actually the live feed from the Q&A in front of the audience at the movie theater before a movie. So it's not even
like a red carpet? Is it? What do you?
Sure, some of them, and some of them are really informal actually, and it's just. Like I did one for Mel Brooks' Blazing Saddles last summer. That was a lot of fun, and I wasn't the interviewer. It was one of the guys from TCM, and it was with kind permission of the festival. As a podcaster, it was great. I just I slapped on an intro and outro so my listeners knew what was going on and where they were, and then we got this great little Mel Brooks interview. And God, I love Mel Brooks. I wish that guy would talk more often, publicly.
I know.
But so that's the benefit of kind of going to these festivals and stuff like that, which I like to do. But it's weird because sometimes they have this great content, and it's really the people in the room see it, and then there's a 2-minute clip online, and it drives me nuts. Only because I want to listen to it.
Yeah. If you're listening out there, let us form a campaign.
Yes,
we can spearhead this.
Indeed.
You're on the West Coast. I'm on the East Coast. We'll
fight from both coasts to the center of America.
There you go, to the Mississippi.
We'll meet in Kansas. But so I mean, that's the thing is that I'm trying to go for long reads and backstory. I'm going for long interviews in the Q&A, my podcast, and basically, as long as it doesn't wear out his welcome, I think it's all good. I don't go for a long interview because I'm shooting for a time limit.
I understand.
I'm going for one to set the record as best as I can, and I try and stay on focus as much as I can with current work, because there's another trend in journalism where people talk about past work more. So I'm guilty of it, as I just told you for Hot Tub Time Machine 2. I did talk about High Fidelity because at the time of High Fidelity, I was not a journalist. So there was just questions that I had about it, which hilariously had the shortest answers of the whole interview because things just came together so fortuitously for that movie that there was no problem.
I went to Austin for South by Southwest, and the first thing I did was just coincidentally John Sayles was there in town, and I sat with him for an hour and a half. So that's awesome. Yeah, I mean, because for the good part of that is I knew he didn't have something brand new. So, and I didn't have to go through a publicist at all, and it was just one of those nice things where I knew I could start talking to him about any film or all his films, because he gave me I knew I had a large block of time, and he didn't have something that he was obligated to talk about. So it was perfect. It's, in a way, the ideal thing. Unfortunately, for most people, you get when they have a new project. And then, your advantage because people know that your Q&A is nuanced, it's going to be more lengthy than the average, that they're going to talk about other things in their past, and I'm sure they're happy to do it, So you don't have to go through publicists generally. Was that the
sounds dreamy?
Yeah, no, because they're going to want to keep you on point and just give you the 15 minutes, and then in that 15 minutes, all you're doing is being their mouthpiece. Now, I mean, and I'm saying this, and there's quite a few publicists that are really exceptional, but it's like I've had to turn down people because they're saying you have even though I went in, I'm pretty sure if you just take the 3 seconds and look at what I do, because most of them know now.
No,
there's still publicists
this
I deal with.
happens all the time. Here's the problem. Okay, I'm going to tell it to you like it is.
Thank you. Finally,
I'm going to tell
somebody.
it to you like it is. So here's the problem, right? There's a whole bunch of journalists these days, and publicists can't tell the difference between who's who, because when they're hired by people as personal publicists, they're getting generally $3,000 to $5,000 per month for representation, and the only goal that they have, rightly so, is volume. So they want to get their talent interviewed by as many places as possible, and the way to do that is to make the interviews short for everybody, so that they could up their volume. But what happens is a depth problem. And so that's what I always battle. I battle it as the publisher of Backstory. I battle it in my podcast. So although I have Oscar winners right and left and nominees during the awards season, and that's when the podcast really has fun and thrives, during the rest of the year, when I want to go for other screenings that actually have potential, even though the studios and publicists don't always realize it, to be nominated, because the Oscar and WGA nominating categories for Best Original Screenplay really is the Wild West. I mean, this year, great example, not many people saw Guardians of the Galaxy coming for a WGA Best Original Screenplay award. I mean, a nomination. I did. I pursued it. It was the cover of Backstory. I thought it was fantastic. But there were some heads that were shaking when that got a WGA nomination for Best Original, but it was a great original. So I mean, like, or adapted. It was adapted, pardon me. But nonetheless, like, it was a surprise, because it is the first Marvel movie to get a WGA nomination, by the way.
Yeah.
So back to on point of what we were talking about, in which I have to say to publicists, remember, when we do a Q&A screening and a podcast, like, people are focusing on your movie for an hour of their free time, and you can't get that by many other means.
Right.
Okay?
And a lot of those other short
are
it's like it's junk food in the sense that it's not gonna have any lasting value.
Sometimes it will, but the problem is it really is just what kind of mood the publicist is in, and they're so overrun with all these requests that you then get into, like you said, these 2 or 3 minute interviews. And I don't know what to do with them either when somebody says, like, you can interview the screenwriter for 10 minutes.
I'm kind of getting off track a little bit, but I'm also kind of curious on a personal level, because obviously you're doing something that I'm doing, and we have a hard out, so that we can end.
No, it's all good.
We can end in a couple of minutes. But do you have to push back? I mean, like, again, like, what I find myself now doing is drawing the line a lot more, because I have to. If I'm not going to be taken seriously if I don't push back.
They don't care. They don't care. They don't care. Here's the problem. Okay.
Yeah.
If talent had any clue what some of the publicists, not all by any means, but what some of the publicists they're paying to represent them do in their name, they'd be furious. But they'll never find out.
Yeah.
So your pushback is strangely it's not against talent. They're never going to know that they missed out on your podcast.
No, right.
It never appeared on a list.
But I'm not even talking about. I'm dealing within this context too. I understand that they're behind the firewall or whatever. I mean I'm talking about in this bubble. I will, if like a publicist, for instance, asks me to bring on some obscure independent film director that nobody, even though it could be a great film, and I wouldn't do it if it wasn't a great film, but I'm still looking at not getting anybody listening from them. I'm not going to get any new audience. The only people going to listen to this say, Adam talks to good people, I'm going to listen to him, because I always do. And then, though, when they get the same publicist gets a film with a real high-profile filmmaker or actor in it, and they're not going to also give me that opportunity when I've done them a kindness, then that's what I mean. I'm going to push back there. So it doesn't even have to do with but if they're not going to give me that person, then I'm not going to do them that favor again. That's kind of what I'm saying.
They're a strange breed. I mean, there's this.
But I'm going to be like, look, I'm happy to help you out, but if it's not reciprocated, then that's the end. I'm not doing it anymore.
Right. Well, so that's the unfortunate thing. Is
there's only 5,000 other publicists and projects out there for me to go through, and that's just those people. There's also tons of other people that I don't even have to go through publicists to get. So I think I'll be okay.
Right, and it deals with these weird personal relationships. I know a few publicists who dread coming to my screening series, because every time that they have a client. And hilariously, it's their client that wants to come be in the screening series. The publicist isn't jumping at the bid.
Why wouldn't they? Of course.
Well, right, but
they understand. But
there's a few publicists that don't want to do it.
Yeah,
and every time we're getting ready to do one, they're like, "Hey, rather than going an hour or 45 minutes, could you just do this like in 15 or 20? Because we're doing 3 other Q&As this week, and they're just going to be 15 or 20 minutes after the screening." And I'm kind of like, it's okay that you don't know what I do. Thank God your client does, but no.
Yeah.
Like and I'm actually being, they don't realize it, but I'm being their best friend in saying that.
Yeah.
In which I'm not a schmo just sitting up there for an hour waxing poetic.
Yeah.
Like and by the way, sometimes I go under an hour. But you know, I'm actually doing you exactly what you want to get the word out there on this movie by doing the usual show that I've been doing since 2003.
Yeah.
So it's like,
Right.
You're telling me that I should change this for you now? Yes, there's been a few circumstances where it's somebody that I've really thought the audience would enjoy, and I'll nail it in 20 or 25. But
wouldn't it be great
very
if they,
few.
rather than they have 200 of these fairly superficial interviews that they have to set up for, let's say, a film, and that's being probably economic.
Yeah, and
but
talent
wouldn't it be
needs it,
great
too.
to have 25 significant
Yeah.
things instead? Like,
But
yours-
again, like I said, the
Yeah.
finances don't work out.
No,
And
no, I
the
get it.
publicists, they have to go for the volume, and I understand that.
Right.
So I try and make it painless for them.
Right.
And by the way, I tell each of the publicists that I know exactly where they're coming from, in which, at least for me, because it's a screening series and we're at night 99% of the time, they're coming from a full day's worth of work. They've taken a break for dinner because they don't need to see the movie again.
Yeah.
And they will go there for the Q&A. And, you know, the Q&A is starting at around 9:30.
Yeah.
So it's a long day for them.
Publicists do work hard.
Yeah,
I
and-
see
and-
them, and they're always traveling. And
Yeah.
they're always going to events every night.
So
They
I try
probably
and
don't
be
have
respectful.
families that they don't. I mean, that's very true.
So it's give and take. I try and
Damn
be
it.
as respectful as I can. And sometimes
anybody.
I've told a few of them, like, you know what? Like,
Uh-huh.
you don't have to come to the screening. It's totally okay.
Yeah.
And they're like, are you kidding me? I'm not just going to send talent there alone. And I'm like, why?
They're
Are they going to die? Is somebody
Well,
going
once
to kill
you
them?
shoot them, then you can send them that.
Yeah, I
They
guess.
won't watch it, but they'll say, look, you here in the future, this is what they're going through. You can watch this whole thing, or they can listen to the podcast. I mean,
Well, right,
and then
but
they're not
I
gonna
understand
do
because
that.
their onus is, look,
Yeah.
we're their representation. We need to be there in case something
Right.
goes crazy. And you know what? Doing it since 2003, nothing's ever gone crazy.
Yeah.
So it doesn't,
Right.
it's all whatever.
Right.
I mean, I understand that they need to do it. I try and make it as painless as possible. I always have a VIP parking space for publicists. They don't have to pay for their own parking. I always, accommodate them and make sure that they have a good seat to sit in the house when they come in for the Q&A. So everything's taken
Or if they
care of.
don't, if they're in the lobby texting.
Well, no, actually, they could.
Yeah.
Actually, it's totally fine for them to sit in their seat and text during the Q&A. That's totally
during
fine.
the Q&A,
During
yes,
the
of
Q&A,
course.
that's totally fine.
All right.
When they
Listen,
do.
the Q&A with Jeff Goldsmith, how often do you podcast?
I try and do weekly. Sometimes I do it every other week, but
Yeah.
especially during the award season, it's weekly. Sometimes I do more than one a week. By
Yeah.
the way, so it all evens out. But
Yeah.
my next one I'm doing for this Friday is it's the director of Lambert and Stamp, which was a Sundance documentary about the managers behind the rock band The Who. And it's a documentary. I don't do a lot of documentaries, but there is definitely storytelling ingrained in documentary films because
And
you have
now-
to find it.
You'll see more and more often in documentary credits. In the credit roll, you'll see screenplays, screenwriters rather.
That's right.
Which was never the case before. And the Backstory, your online magazine, which has been historically available only through the iPad, but is now going to be available to anyone who has an online internet connection.
On backstory.net.
And-
That's basically where people will find it. At backstory.net, what we're doing for our launch is the same thing that we launched on the iPad. You'll go to backstory.net. You'll sign up for a free account, totally free, and then once you log in, you will have access to our first issue that we ever published, which was a double issue. I think we published, oh man, I should know this, but I think it was 3 screenplays and 2 stage plays. No, it was 1 stage play and 4 screenplays, something like that. And we even had a short film embedded in there with the short film screenplay by the actress Brie Larson. She co-directed
Sure,
it,
she was on this
co-wrote it.
podcast.
Yeah, she's great. And so
Short-term 12.
yeah. So it was a short film that she did with some friends that was in the first issue. And basically, if you read that issue, you'll know what Backstory is because we had Bessie, which is a famous unproduced screenplay by Richard Kelly that we published in there, and we did a huge interview with him about it. It's about a cow that could talk, that gains sentience through a lab experiment and then starts becoming dangerous and might destroy mankind. Very silly, odd screenplay from the guy that wrote Donnie Darko. He wrote it when he was depressed because he thought Donnie Darko was never going to come out because at Sundance it was panned horribly. And it's just been this thing that's been too expensive to make. And that's what I love championing in Backstory, in which screenwriters who have these great scripts that for political reasons, for budgetary reasons, changeovers in studio heads, they are not getting made. Bessie has been sitting on his shelf since 2001. And I was happy to liberate it for our readers, in which the full screenplay's there. We have a full interview putting it in context. Richard Kelly had so much fun talking about it and kind of getting back into it that he's actually been doing a rewrite on Bessie since we published that and still trying to make it. When he originally wrote it in 2001, a talking cow movie was going to cost $60 million, right? The precedent was Babe, the talking pig movie. Now Bessie's much more affordable. Now you could do Bessie under 20 for sure. So you know, I mean,
Well, now
think of it
cows
this way: there was
talk. So.
yeah, well, there was this Sundance movie that was so great that I had in my screening series recently, The Voices, which has a talking cat, a talking dog. You know what I mean? Like, and it was great, and they did that for under $2 million, I'm pretty sure. So I mean, it's just how you pick it. So we also generally run a blacklist script in each issue from the famous current blacklist.
Right.
You know, the best unproduced screenplays of the year. So we run one of those with an interview, and we run the ones that are not produced. You know, as opposed to the ones that you're seeing in theaters.
And when does it go online? When is this issue available? When are these issues?
You know, these issues will be available soon. We're sitting about talking now as I'm in testing, and it's just I got to get the security and the paywall and everything else. It's going to be spring or early summer, but I'm rushing to get it up there as fast as possible.
We'll keep in touch, and we'll post. The people, when you're listening to this, it's because we've had a couple of conversations.
Yes, and it's you could read this issue totally free. The story I just told you about with Bessie, that is in our first issue. The other cool thing in our first issue was I interviewed novelist Rex Pickett about his play Sideways, based on his book.
Oh, yeah, sure.
And so he turned it into a stage play, and he let us publish the stage play in its entirety. And so you could see the differences kind of because he really reverted to his book. That's the way he was able to do it. So that the things that Alexander Payne smartly invented for the film that worked beautifully in the film, he won an Oscar for it, for God's sakes. You know, some of those are missing. And are replaced with some elements from the book that weren't in the film that Rex just wanted to see.
Yeah, I actually have the screenplay for that.
Yeah, it's great. Well,
they
actually,
released it
in issue
commercially.
two, strangely, because we were talking to Rex about this, we are the only place in the world that he allowed to publish his screenplay for Vertical. Vertical is his novel sequel to Sideways.
I didn't know there was a sequel.
Oh, God, there's 3 of them now.
There is?
Yeah, and they're great, and they're really, really good. And so
Are
Vertical,
these going to be made into films?
Well, we talk about why it's not.
Okay.
Our cover of issue 2 is
These are the questions that you have, and that can only be answered if you subscribe.
Or you could buy a back issue.
Or you could buy one.
You could buy it one issue at a time. You do not have to subscribe. You could buy a back issue one issue at a time. You could buy a new issue one issue at a time.
Right.
And no, Rex talks about it in which he really would love for Vertical to be made, but just the powers that be aren't there yet. And it's so good. Vertical is just a great, you know, it's Miles, the Paul Giamatti character from the first movie, and he's on a road trip in the second movie with his mom, who's mentioned in the first movie. And she's taking her to elder care. And his mom is just if you think Miles is dark, wait till you meet his mom. And by the way, Vertical is a great book. So, you know, people could go read the book right now, too.
Okay, great. Oh, what's the author's name?
Rex Pickett.
Rex Pickett. Okay,
yeah.
very good.
But so backstory.net, you will be able to find all this sometime soon. By the time people are hearing this, backstory.net, go there, get a free login, check out free issue 1, and see what you want to see for back issues or subscribing.
It's great. So glad to have met you. Finally.
Glad to meet you, too.
Yeah.
Independent journalists, we must stay together.
Well, even if we're coasts apart, but we'll do this again maybe in LA next time?
Yeah.
Okay.
Come on out.
Thanks so much.
Much better weather.
Thank you, Jeff.
Take it easy, man. Thanks for having me.
In 1916, America was changing. Expanding. Holding a promise of new prosperity. People heard the call, and it made them restless. Empires were being built in the wide open spaces. And so they came. Each one boldly, blindly searching for the days of heaven. Days of Heaven. The story of a man who had nothing. The woman who loved him.
You're crazy.
And the man who would give her everything for a share of that love.
You know what I thought when I first saw you? I thought if only I could touch her, that everything would be all right.
Three people whose destinies joined briefly in a dream. But how long could it last? The days of heaven.
I don't really never properly met Sam Shepard, but there were many times, well, many, 2 or 3 times, maybe more, where, you know, being a New Yorker, and he lived in New York, probably among other places, but I would see him on the street. I at least 3 or 4 occasions I can recall, even just the places. Once walking through Washington Square Park, once, and just each time I passed him, you know, he did a nod because he knew I knew that I was looking at a great playwright and a great actor. I also was very lucky, having grown up in New York, got to see a number of his plays. I got to see Buried Child on Broadway. I got to see True West off-Broadway. I got to see Fool for Love in Los Angeles back in the 80s. I believe I saw Curse of the Starving Class as well. But I'm going to have to do a little bit. I'm pretty sure the man wrote dozens of plays, you know, not known for writing that many, but there were quite a number, more than most people think or remember. And then, of course, there was his screen career, which is enormous. He was a very enormously prolific actor on the screen as well. And right, by the way, right up through doing, I think, part of the first season of Bloodline, but his character dies, I think, a few episodes in. But he was still working right up to the end, of course. But if you haven't seen him in a lot of stuff, I guess I would start, of course, with the film that put him on the map, which was Terrence Malick's Days of Heaven. Came out in 1978. And then I think by the time he had done The Right Stuff a few years later, everybody had fallen for him, and he just became a kind of the strong silent type, you know, leading man, cowboy, the loner, right up to the end. Sam Shepard, dead at 73. Lisanne Skyler has made a few films. Actually, it turns out she made a documentary called No Loans Today, and then she made a film called Getting to Know You, and I assumed that was in 1999. I assumed that was a narrative film. Then she was back in 2000 with Dreamland, a documentary, followed by a short narrative called Capture the Flag. Finally, she has a new documentary, and it's going to be broadcast on HBO, premiering this coming Monday night, August the 7th, at 10 o'clock for HBO subscribers and HBO Go and HBO Now subscribers. So you'll want to check it out. This is my conversation with the filmmaker, Lisanne Skyler.
1964, Andy Warhol shocked the art world by making hundreds of replicas of supermarket cartons and presenting them as art.
Critics said, how could this be art? What is Warhol doing? Has he gone insane?
His most notorious were the Brillo boxes. That same year, my parents got engaged. They married, began collecting art, and bought this yellow Brillo box.
The reality was, is this art? I loved it.
But soon after, my father traded our Brillo box for work by another artist. The Brillo box left our living room and went on a journey of its own. Was there ever a point where you wished that you had kept it?
Well, very recently I did. The piece fetched millions.
It had a place. Life has changed. It left.
Yeah, Lisanne Skyler. It's like almost like a French name or something.
Yeah, I think my mom was a bit of a Francophile, and so there's a little bit of some aspirational, like, French going on there, but although it's not technically a French name.
Well, certainly not Skyler, anyway.
No. I cannot cling to any French as much as I would, I'm sure, like to.
Where'd you grow up again? You grew up in New York City or in the suburb?
No, I grew up in the city, Upper East Side.
Okay, very good. That's right. Your dad was an ADA.
He was an assistant DA for a while. That's how he started.
So he's an attorney?
Yes. He's recently retired now, but yeah, he practiced criminal defense for many years.
And your mother?
My mom she studied special education and then worked for years in the public school system working with, kids in the special education program.
Mm-hmm. It's one of the fascinating things is like when your mom was having you, right? She was in the hospital having birthed you. Step in any time if I misspeak or if you want to correct me or improve on the story. But essentially, this period of time when, once upon a time, people before most probably my listeners were alive or could remember, that when you had a baby, you went to the hospital. You often were in the hospital for, at least a few days, maybe longer, right? Recovering, and it wasn't outpatient like procedure.
Well, what's also such a sign of the times, too, is that my dad, he's told that story a few times, and it always struck me the way, he would consistently always say, I had nothing to do, and in today's climate, that would never happen, it's so, the parenting roles have changed so much. So, but yeah, it was just that moment of having that free afternoon, and, a friend being a friend saying, let's go take a look at some art. And that's how it all began for my dad.
Next thing you know, they had a Brillo box, an original Andy Warhol.
Right. Yes. It very much coincided with my my birth.
Wow. So it's like twins.
Oh yeah, my twin.
Separated at birth.
Great, my doppelganger. I love that. It's much cuter than I am, but yeah.
But fortunately, in your case, you weren't like covered by plexiglass, But...
No, they definitely, it was much more about protecting the art from the kids.
From you, yeah. I'll take a step backward here. We've been kind of kibitzing, but essentially you created this documentary told through talking to your parents primarily, but also through some archive and whatnot, which is called Brillo Box, 3 cents off, which is about your parents having bought this piece of artwork that was an Andy Warhol product, and then the trajectory of that art after your parents sold it some years later.
Exactly.
Is that a fair description, or?
Well, I think that's definitely the premise of the film. It is, very much an exploration about, kind of the mystery of what that box meant in our family, as well as just, a story about value and how things change, how creative works, cultural objects, how they just are constantly shifting in meaning as we go through time.
Mm-hmm. Interestingly enough, before I got here, I just came from another conversation I had with another documentary filmmaker who was telling me that when he was a young guy and he first moved to New York, he worked for Andy Warhol at the Interview magazine.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
What an education that's been.
Really? Your parents, their Brillo box, which sat in your living room when you were just... do you have any memories of it? Other than the photos that you can look at?
I don't have memories of the box itself because it really was the first, year and a half, 2 years of my life. I really just only remember it from just looking in the photo album, and the photo album itself. There's a way in which we kind of make memories from photographs, and it was definitely one of those things where because it had been in our photo album for so long, and I would just look at it over the years, and every time I go back to it, it would kind of mean something else, or make me wonder different questions about my family. But I do remember the art, and my most primal, most basic family memories are just, Saturday afternoons at Ivan Karp's gallery or Louis Meisel's gallery, and just kind of sitting, and while my parents were talking to the dealers and the artists, and sometimes looking at the art and wondering why my parents brought me here, because often we would look at things that were quite edgy or or disturbing, and then also just as a child, I was a bit of a daydreamy kind of kid, and I just always remember just staring at the walls. And art is a very nonverbal experience. It's often hard to put into words what you feel when you look at a work, and we didn't actually talk about it so much. There were conversations about, wow, that piece is kind of strange, because one day we'd come home and there would be this giant canvas of of bananas, there was this artist named Jim Sullivan, and a huge canvas my parents put in our bedroom of this kind of moody man and woman talking to each other with almost like this film noir sort of frame, and then yellow bananas everywhere. And my parents thought it was absolutely fantastic. And my sister and I, we would have liked to have our, Rolling Stones posters up. So I do remember just the looking at the art and the experience of going to galleries with my family, and just the importance of art in our household. And that kind of seminal memory was kind of the first seed of what drew the film, what drove the film.
Yeah. I just want to get back to, I'm very interested in nostalgia. It's a big part of my own DNA and the way I assess my life, And your mom, both your parents sort of have a bittersweet recollections of this time and of what the box meant, and and your mom in particular, whenever she brings up, she talks about how much she loved the finding the box, the getting it, having it in the home, and then there was it feels like a real sense of loss of almost a family member, by the time they sold it, Is that fair to say? And even in the way you portray it in the family photos, it's kind of funny. It's like this family member that was all of a sudden missing one day, and but you look back at it, it was always there, or at least for a while.
I love that take on it. It really was like a family member, and I think that's part of what, it was part of what I was interested in, like why make a movie about an inanimate object, because it's not a person that you can relate to. But I think there's a way in which these objects, they connect us to other people. They connect us to things. They connect us to time, certain times, certain places, other people, the sharing of ideas. And so, you look at that box, and over the years, it means so many different things to different people. And I think to my parents at the time, it was part of what they were engaged in. They liked stuff that was ahead of its time. I think they had a great sense of humor, and I think there's a lot of there's an aspect of the Brillo Box that's just super playful and fun. There's that surface level of it. But I think over time, it did come to represent just this moment in my family's life where we have this incredible art, where we're exposed to all these things, and also where we really connected through it too.
Well, the other thing the film does, and
I'm nostalgic also.
You were going to say something?
I'm a nostalgic person also. I think it drives a lot of my filmmaking.
I see it, and that's why I invited you on. I relate. It's the name of the film, Brillo, or full title is Brillo Box, parenthesis 3 cents off. And the other thing it does is, as you I think referred to earlier, is that it does follow the trajectory of this piece of work afterward, and the astronomical sale. Your parents seem to be okay with that. They seem to survive, later sale of the box.
I mean, I think it was challenging to make the film and to revisit it, and what's interesting to my parents is my mom like me is a very nostalgic person, and it's very much front and center, and my dad has that element of nostalgia, but it's so subtle, and he also is someone who does not look back and regret things, which is probably very healthy.
Yeah.
But when it was so interesting how it all evolved, because I had just come from making a fiction piece, very nostalgic period piece, like a little coming of age story set in the 70s, and it was based on my friend's novel, and I was like, it's time to tell I really felt this need to kind of go back and do my own story, like my own nostalgia,
Mm-hmm.
And so I started with my parents and that time, and right after I started interviewing them and doing a little like test shoot with my parents, and I found out that through my mom, who actually said, you should check out the auction season and see what's going on, because it's, maybe you'll find the box, which I thought was impossible. And, there it was. So the night of the sale, I had people filming, and I was just dreading telling my dad what it was going to sell. I had like knots in my stomach because I knew it was going to be tough. But I think through, it was very collaborative with my parents. And I think making the film was really a way to kind of, like process what happened in a sense, in a way that, like without it being like, oh, we lost the box. It's like, oh, actually, having all that art and living with all that art was really pretty amazing. And people should continue to collect at that level now, because the art world is not just, Warhol and, and de Kooning and now Basquiat for tens and hundreds of millions. It's so many new artists coming up, and that, that's where we should really turn our attention to, I think.
Absolutely. It gives more humanity to the subject of art as commerce. So I think people will appreciate that. And anyway, we're talking with filmmaker Lisanne Skyler about her new documentary, which is going to be on HBO. Debuts on HBO August 7th. I believe it's on at 10 o'clock in the evening that on the 7th. Now, you got to tell me how this little movie you made about your family and about this famous piece of artwork comes to be on HBO. How did that happen?
That is a very special story, and kind of serendipitous in the way that, so many elements of this movie came together. So this was one of these films. I've worked in a range of types of movies, and this was one where I just was like, it may be a little bit quirky, but I just have to make this. And I worked on it for a while, just gathering footage and raising funds. I received seed funding from the university where I teach, University of Arizona. And once I got to a point that I had a little sample, a couple little, trailers that I liked, I applied to Independent Film Week by IFP, or I believe now in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
And that's that. I kind of called it the initial public offering, because they have a market where you can meet with people and show the work and sort of talk with people, get feedback, which is super helpful.
Yes.
And at that point, I hadn't been active in documentary actually for a very long time. So that was part of why I thought I'm going to try IFP first and kind of see how people respond. But at that point, once it was accepted and presented there, I reached out to Lisa Heller, who is Senior Vice President of HBO Documentary Films and is a senior producer of the film. And Lisa and I worked together when Lisa produced my film No Loans Today, a POV, 2 decades ago.
What was it called?
Talking about time. Time is definitely a theme in this film. And I really was not expecting it. I've always dreamed about making a film for HBO. I think the movies are amazing and that Sheila Nevins is a genius. But it was just one of those, it would be just great to share with Lisa what I'm doing. And then one day I got this phone call and I was very surprised and excited. And she had shared the trailer with Sheila and they decided to explore the project. And that's how it grew from there. And it was really, the film is such it's a very much a reflection of the collaboration and, I should say very much a collaboration in the sense that I started the film. I was a little bit like, Nicolas Cage and when he was in adaptation, where he's like this writer and he's going to make a film about flowers. And I really was focused on the box. I was very much interested in, being very minimalist. And I also, I think deep down, and I think Sheila probably figured this out, that deep down I was probably a little bit nervous about making it a first person film because they can be, it's a risky endeavor,
Yes.
But as we worked on it, Sheila said you really need to do the narration, and you really need to bring in the first person aspect of this. And she was so absolutely right. And I think it was the way that it kind of allowed the film to be told in the right way, but also kind of, I think brought the film back to its roots because it was a very personal story, and I was motivated for very personal reasons. Certainly, very personal reasons as well as, the reasons that motivate me as a documentary filmmaker. I'm always interested in economics and culture and how these things fit together and, impact each other. But, the guidance that HBO provided really, I think, brought it back to its core.
Well, again, the documentary will be premiering on HBO on the 7th of August, coming right up. And it's going to be on at 10 o'clock in the evening. So make sure to put that in your schedule or get ready to watch that. You mentioned before you did one documentary for POV, you said, or ended up on POV. Which one was that?
So that film was called No Loans Today.
No Loans Today, got it.
And I made it, so it's a film that centers on a pawn shop in South Central Los Angeles.
Yeah, so you made it right after the riots or within a year or two of that, yeah.
It was really, I was very, disturbed by the media coverage of the riots. It was so dehumanizing. And then by this amazing serendipitous moment, like the way so many documentaries happen, a friend of mine from college, her dad said, I know this man who owns a pawn shop right in the middle of South Central, which struck me as like the, just kind of the ultimate metaphor and like way to, anchor the film. So yeah, it was, went to Sundance and then was picked up for POV, which is how I met Lisa Heller. And it was actually recently re-released for streaming through Sundance through Sundance Artist Services.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I haven't seen it. I'd be very curious to see it. It sounds like something I'd read.
Now on iTunes and yeah, it was great to be able to, revisit that work.
And what was the narrative that you adapted from your friend's novel? What was that one?
Oh, that is a film called, the book is called Capture the Flag, and it's by Rebecca Chase, who's just a brilliant author. And it's a story about families and divorce in the 70s. And the short was actually adapted from a feature. We had written a feature-length script about based on the book, and it followed this girl who her family's getting separated, and so there's an uptown. The main character is in uptown. She lives uptown. Her best friends live downtown, and as her parents are separating, all of her family traditions are falling apart. Namely, a game called Capture the Flag, which the families would always, gather.
I went to summer camp every year. I know only too well what Capture the Flag is.
So it's also a very nostalgic piece. And in the longer story, one of the girls gets pregnant and they kind of run away. They kind of start their own family. But in the short film, which is also called Capture the Flag, it was about this moment when Annie realizes that, her parents are separating, all the traditions are kind of falling apart, and the families gather to play this game, and it's like no one's interested in it anymore. Like,
right.
It's all about kind of moving on and letting go of childhood.
Yeah.
Becca and I are now working actually on a TV series, loosely inspired by the novel and actually Brillo Box and that time of New York. Like,
it's New
York.
It's the New York I grew up in too.
Oh, excellent.
The New York of the 70s and to the 80s. The bygone era.
How it has changed.
How it has changed is exactly right. So, but ultimately, I guess, and then you had a Brillo Box. Just to get back to the film on hand here, I do also noted that it was at last year's New York Film Festival, so that's great.
Yes.
Have
a great way to bring it to. Yes, it was a great way to bring it. Share it with Manhattan audience, New York audiences is really, really terrific. It basically was did about a year of festivals before now that it's going to air.
Was the length of it a problem for you at all, or?
That is an interesting point. Yeah, I mean, it can be. It's because like often festivals will show it as part of a shorts block, and so then you have like this 40-minute short,
Yeah.
But it did. I think it managed to get into a number of festivals despite that. Sometimes it would play as a feature.
Right.
Provincetown Film Festival showed it as a feature with a couple of shorts before that. Because it's kind of like a short with little feature added. We pack a lot in.
You're asking festival programmers to think outside the box. In this case, a Brillo Box.
We heard a lot of, sometimes preemptive, like, well, the one, Yeah. So we were really grateful. It went to played Portland, Big Sky, a new festival in the Bay Area for documentaries called Docklands, Florida Film Festival, a number of really great regional, festivals across the country. And sometimes it was played in an art museum, as part of the festival, which is terrific.
Makes complete sense. And then even for a broadcast length, you may have run into the same issues, but apparently that wasn't a stumbling block. Because generally a broadcast is usually 50 plus minutes, right?
That's true. Although I think now with like the streaming model, I feel like it's kind of wide open. But what it was, I had initially conceived of it as a feature length film, and what I first turned into HBO was about a 56-minute cut, or maybe 52 minutes. And the idea was we were gonna. My idea was I was gonna expand it, but Lisa and Sheila felt they really saw it as a short, and I'm really glad they thought it was saw it that way, because I think that it really forced me to reduce it to its most basic points.
Which is always a good thing for any film, truthfully.
And it really trains you too, because and particularly with a film like this, and once it moved into a more personal arena, you can really fall into danger in editorializing too much or commenting too much. And Lisa Heller was one thing she would always say is once we decided we were narrating, and I can tell you, absolutely terrified, but once I started, I just kind of started writing all this stuff, and Lisa would just just stick with the facts. She'd literally be like, just the facts, ma'am. And I was like, oh, that's right. You just let the story speak for itself. But I think you always want it, particularly now. I mean, particularly in our, the era we're in now, where there's just so much content. But you always, as a filmmaker, I think, want to be as efficient, as you can, and as economic as possible.
Right. I mean, as we're kind of suggesting, the underlying issue is that often films are edited to accommodate someone else's needs, and that's not organic to any film. That's just accommodation.
Right.
So in this case, you have a very organic length for the film, and it was good advice. So, I'm just so glad to have seen it and to have the opportunity to talk with you.
Thank you so much. Great talking with you.
Same here. And for more information, people can visit BrilloBoxMovie.com, right?
Yes. We're online at BrilloBoxMovie.com.
Will it be available on HBO Go and all that?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Go to On Demand, HBO Now. We'll debut it August 7th, and then they will have it. It'll be on the HBO platforms for 2 years.
Oh, wow. That's wonderful.
Yeah, very excited for people to see it.
Thank you very much, Lisanne Skyler.
Thank you. Great talking with you.
Thank you, everybody, for listening to the podcast. Of course, we'll be back in just a few days with a new episode with the team behind the Sundance indie hit Patty Cakes. You'll really not... Go check out the trailer right now, actually, while it's on your mind, if you're not familiar with it, and you'll see just why I was very excited to bring on the team, and we'll be playing that for you on the next episode. Until then, though, please do take care of yourself and the ones you love. Until next time, take care.